Welcome to Mr. Phantom Channel, a place where spiritual mysteries and ghostly stories are unveiled. This is not for the faint of heart, but a doorway into another realm, a world where the shadows murmur the truth. If you're a fan of spine-chilling tales and the supernatural, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting explorations. Get ready. The darkness holds secrets waiting to be discovered. The Haunting of Room 304, District 5 Hospital, Saigon. In September 2015, on a rainy afternoon, my father, Mr. Tam, was admitted to District 5 Hospital in Saigon due to a worsening chronic lung condition. The hospital, built during the French colonial period, bore an aged and eerie appearance. Its long, dimly lit hallways, creaking wooden doors, and the pale yellow glow of overhead lights gave the building a chilling, movie-like aura. My father was assigned to room 304 on the third floor of the main building. Oddly, this room had only one hospital bed, unlike the other rooms that accommodated 2 patients. Initially, our family thought it was a stroke of luck that my father could have a private space to recover. Little did we know, this marked the beginning of a series of chilling and unexplainable events. On the first night, my father called me with a trembling voice, and the air conditioner in my room is acting weird. I set it to 28 degrees, but it keeps dropping to 18. It's freezing. I adjust it back, but after a while, it resets to 18 degrees again. I thought the air conditioner might be broken, but the nurses assured me that everything was in working order. Strangely enough, this issue only happened at night. In the nights that followed, not only the air conditioner but the entire atmosphere in the room grew unnaturally cold. Even with the windows tightly shut, it felt as though a chilling breeze seeped in, carrying an unsettling, heavy presence. On the third night, as I sat beside my father's bed, he suddenly turned to look at the door, his face filled with confusion. Do people just walk in and out of hospital rooms like that here? I was puzzled. What are you talking about, Dad? Who walked into the room? I just saw 2 people in white coats walk in. They didn't say anything, and then they vanished. I turned to look, but the door was tightly shut, and the corridor outside was empty. Only the faint glow of hallway lights seeped through the small window on the door. That night, I felt as though shadows flitted across the doorway, quick and elusive, evading my attempts to catch a proper look. On the 5th night, my father shared something even more unsettling. He sat upright in bed, staring intently at a corner of the room. These 2 kids are so naughty. One is holding a doll, and the other is playing with a star-shaped lantern. They keep running back and forth in front of my bed. Chills ran down my spine. I looked around the room but saw nothing other than the faint glow from the ceiling lights. Dad, there's no one here, I whispered. I can see them clearly. They're laughing, running, and playing. Maybe the hospital takes care of orphan children. Poor little things. I didn't have the heart to tell him that this hospital had no pediatric wing. In the nights that followed, my father continued to see these children. He said they appeared late at night, their laughter echoing faintly in the room. Once, he described a boy sitting in the corner, facing the wall, mumbling words no one could understand. On the 7th night, as I entered the room to check on my father, he was staring fixedly at the ceiling. What are you looking at, Dad? Without taking his eyes off the ceiling, he replied, There's something big sitting on the clock up there. It's just watching me, refusing to come down. I followed his gaze but saw only an old wall clock. Yet, An undeniable chill emanated from that direction, sending shivers down my spine. My father didn't take his eyes off the clock all night, his expression filled with unease. It felt as though an invisible force was lingering in the room, his presence heavy and oppressive, determined to uncover the truth. I spoke to the hospital's security guard. He revealed that room 304 had a tragic history dating back to the 1980s. A renowned surgeon had taken his own life in the room after 2 children he operated on died shortly after surgery. Since then, patients staying in room 304 frequently reported eerie phenomena. Shadows moving near the door, children's laughter, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Many had requested transfers after just one night in the room. On the final night before my father's discharge, I decided to stay with him. At around 2 a.m., the room fell deathly silent. Then, faint laughter echoed from the corner of the room. My father turned to me, his eyes wide with fear. "Do you hear that? They're playing in the corner." Before I could respond, the lights in the room flickered and then went out entirely. Darkness engulfed us, broken only by the dim light streaming in from the hallway. In the silence, I felt a cold breath on my neck. Then, a raspy voice whispered chillingly in my ear, "Leave this place." I scrambled to turn on my phone's flashlight but saw nothing. My father was clutching his blanket, reciting prayers under his breath. Finally, the day came for my father to leave the hospital. As he stepped out of room 304, he paused and glanced back one last time, his face a mixture of relief and unease. Back at home, my father didn't mention the strange occurrences again. However, he began burning incense daily and praying, as though trying to cleanse himself of lingering spirits. The tale of room 304 at District 5 Hospital is not just my father's memory, but also an enduring nightmare for me. To this day, whenever I think back, it feels as though I'm back in that room, feeling the cold air and the invisible eyes that followed our every move. Room 304 remains, waiting silently for its next occupant. But who can say whether they'll leave without carrying a part of its haunted history with them? The mysterious footsteps. In 2017, I moved into a small house located in the countryside of British Columbia, Canada. The house belonged to my sister, Amanda, who had purchased it along with a 3-acre plot of land. The wooden house, with its weathered shingles and a moss-covered roof, stood amidst vast fields and dense forests, exuding an eerie yet serene vibe. I lived in a small wooden cabin adjacent to the main house. About 30 meters away, the main house had a peculiar room at the back, converted from an old barn. This room was long and narrow, divided into 2 sections by a thin wall. At the far end, there were 4 large windows covered with silver foil to block sunlight. Amanda had told me she often heard strange noises from this room, but we both brushed it off as just the quirks of an old house. Life seemed peaceful at first, but that peace was short-lived, as strange occurrences began to unfold. It was a chilly autumn evening. I was leaning against one of the foil-covered windows in the back room, gazing out at the vast field behind the house. The cold wind howled through the trees, and the night was deathly quiet. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. The sound of footsteps echoed from inside the back room. They were heavy, deliberate, and unmistakable. I froze, listening intently. The steps began at the doorway of the room, slowly advancing toward the window I was leaning against. 5 footsteps. Each step resonated as though someone was stepping over the clutter scattered on the floor. It was as if the sound was replayed from a recording, identical in tone and volume with every step. When the 5th step sounded, panicked, I backed away from the window, keeping a safe distance of about 15 meters. The footsteps stopped abruptly. The silence returned, but I couldn't shake the sense that something, or someone, was watching me from inside. Several nights later, around midnight, I found myself outside near another foil-covered window of the same room. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate further. Once again, the footsteps began. Starting from the room's doorway, the sound moved steadily toward the window where I stood. This time, I counted each step carefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I backed away, just like before. As I moved, I had the distinct feeling that something inside the room was aware of my presence. On the third night, I deliberately stood outside the farthest window of the room. It was almost 2 a.m., and the cold night air chilled me to the bone. I wanted to see if the pattern would repeat itself, and it did. The footsteps started again, identical in sound and rhythm. They traveled the length of the room, heading toward me. Each step was deliberate, heavy, and unchanging. As the fifth step echoed, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. Panic set in, and I fled, vowing never to approach that room at night again. By the fourth night, curiosity got the better of me once more. This time, I tried to provoke whatever was causing the footsteps. I knocked on the foil-covered window, the sound reverberating in the quiet night. Nothing happened. Relieved, I turned to leave, but as I glanced back at the window, my blood ran cold. A dark shadow loomed behind the foil, its form vaguely human. It stood motionless for a few seconds before slowly bending down. As though peering out at me, I screamed and bolted back to my cabin. Slamming the door shut, my heart pounded in my chest as I sat in the darkness, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Unable to contain my fear any longer, I told Amanda everything. First, she dismissed my story, but her expression changed when I described the shadow. She hesitated before revealing something chilling. Years ago, when she bought the house, the neighbors had mentioned its eerie history. The previous owners, a family of Scottish descent, were rumored to have performed strange rituals in the back room. Some locals claimed to have seen lights flickering in the windows at night and heard chants carried by the wind. I shivered as she recounted these tales. Could the strange phenomena I experienced be connected to those stories? One night, as I lay in my cabin, I was awakened by the sound of heavy footsteps outside. They weren't human. Each step was accompanied by a deep, resonating thud, as though something massive was stalking through the yard. Peering through the window, I saw a dark, hulking figure moving slowly toward my cabin. Its form was indistinct, shifting like smoke in the moonlight. I locked the door and turned off all the lights. Trembling with fear, the figure stopped in front of my window, its presence casting an oppressive weight over the room. It lingered for what felt like hours before finally vanishing into the darkness. The next morning, Amanda and I decided it was time to leave. We could no longer ignore the escalating terror that the house seemed to harbor. Amanda put the property up for sale, and we moved out within weeks. Before leaving, I stood outside the back room one last time. The morning sun illuminated the foil-covered windows, but I swore I saw a shadowy figure standing behind the glass, watching me as I walked away. Even after moving away, the memories of those nights continued to haunt me. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing the faint sound of footsteps, 5 deliberate steps echoing in my mind. Though the house now belonged to another family, I couldn't help but wonder, did the footsteps stop, or were they still pacing through the back room, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to arrive? This story is a chilling reminder of the mysteries that linger just beyond our understanding. Some questions are better left unanswered, and some places are better left undisturbed. The darkness in the crevice. In 2019, my husband Josh, our small dog Max, and I temporarily moved into an old hotel on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts. The hotel, called the Whispering Pines, was known for its charming yet eerie atmosphere. The red brick walls, weathered by time, and the tall stained glass windows gave the building a haunting beauty. We chose this place because of its affordable rent and its pet-friendly policy, a rare find in the area. However, from the moment I stepped inside, I felt an unsettling presence. The long, dimly lit hallways were adorned with vintage portraits, their painted eyes seemingly following our every move. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. Our room was on the third floor, at the end of a narrow corridor. It was small but comfortable, with a double bed, an old wooden wardrobe, and a desk. What caught my attention, though, was a dark crevice on the floor near a heating pipe that ran along the wall. The crevice seemed bottomless, as if leading to an unknown abyss. From the beginning, Max started acting strangely. He often sat beside the crevice, growling softly or sniffing intently. One night, while Josh was asleep, Max began scratching the floor near the crevice, his ears pinned back as if he was scared. His uneasiness unsettled me, but I tried to calm him down. The next day, I decided to investigate, shining a flashlight into the crevice. I saw nothing but darkness. Strangely, the air in the room grew colder, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly moved away and shut the door, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. During a casual conversation at the reception desk, I spoke with Linda, one of the hotel staff. She was a kind, middle-aged woman with an air of caution. I mentioned Max's peculiar behavior and the crevice in our room. Linda hesitated before speaking, then leaned closer and whispered, "Didn't anyone tell you? This hotel used to be a psychiatric hospital. The basement served as the morgue. People say strange things happen here, especially near areas connected to the lower levels." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Though skeptical, I couldn't ignore the eerie coincidence. I returned to our room with a growing sense of unease. One night, I was reading while Josh slept soundly. Out of nowhere, I heard scratching noises coming from the crevice. Startled, I looked at Max, who was now cowering in the corner, his eyes fixed on the dark gap. Grabbing my flashlight, I moved cautiously toward the crevice. As the light hit the opening, I thought I saw a shadow dart away, but it was so quick I couldn't be sure. The scratching stopped immediately. Max whimpered softly, refusing to move from his spot. Over the next few nights, the sounds grew louder and more distinct. Sometimes, I heard faint whispers emanating from the crevice, calling my name, Sarah. One stormy night, while Josh worked late, I stayed in the room alone. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows. Max lay curled up on the bed, his eyes glued to the crevice. Around midnight, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Thinking it was another guest, I opened the door to look, but the hallway was empty. As I closed the door, it slammed shut with a force that made me jump. Suddenly, the scratching from the crevice began again, louder and more frantic than ever. I froze as I saw a dark figure slowly rise from the gap. Its form was vague, almost smoky, but its glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness. The following morning, I shared my experience with Josh, but he dismissed it as a bad dream. Still shaken, I decided to talk to other guests. A couple staying on the 4th floor told me their lights flickered on and off all night, and they often heard footsteps above their room, even though they were on the top floor. Another guest claimed to have seen a shadowy figure move across the hallway, only to vanish behind a locked door. These accounts confirmed that we were not alone in experiencing strange phenomena. The hotel seemed to hold dark secrets, and the crevice in our room felt like the epicenter of it all. The most terrifying night came just before we decided to leave the hotel. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of whispers. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I turned my head and froze. A dark shadow was crawling out of the crevice. Its limbs were unnaturally long and twisted, moving with an eerie, inhuman fluidity. Max barked and jumped off the bed, but the shadow paid no attention to him, climbed onto the bed, and I felt its weight pressing down on my chest. I couldn't move or scream. The only thing I could do was stare into its glowing red eyes. Josh woke up and turned on the lights, and the shadow vanished instantly. I burst into tears, telling him we had to leave immediately. The next morning, we packed our belongings and checked out of the Whispering Pines. As we drove away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as if we had escaped something truly malevolent. Max slowly returned to his usual self after we left, but the memories of that place still haunt me. The crevice, the whispers, and the shadowy figure are vivid in my mind, a constant reminder that some places are best left unexplored. The darkness in the crevice is a story I will never forget, a chilling testament to the thin veil between our world and the unknown. The Haunting on Elmwood Street. In 2020, after a challenging period in my life, my wife, Emma, and I temporarily moved into a camper on my sister Linda's property on Elmwood Street, a quiet suburb near Denver, Colorado. Linda lived in a large, vintage-style house with a guest house in the back and a sprawling yard surrounded by dense woods. A small stream ran behind the property, adding to its peaceful but somewhat eerie charm. Our 30-foot camper was parked near the guest house, sheltered under a tin roof to protect it from the elements. First, everything seemed normal. Day by day, we settled into the simple and tranquil life the property offered. But that peace didn't last long. One scorching August afternoon, around 1 p.m., the temperature soared to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I was lying in the camper's bedroom, trying to escape the oppressive heat. Suddenly, I heard voices coming from the direction of the guest house. First, I thought it was Linda talking to someone, but the voices sounded strange, unfamiliar and unintelligible. The sounds grew louder. There seemed to be 7 or 8 distinct voices, chattering in a language I couldn't recognize. They moved closer, shifting from the guest house to the back door of the camper. I froze, straining to hear what they were saying, but I couldn't make out a single word. Then, as suddenly as they had started, the voices stopped. The doorknob to the camper began to rattle, but it didn't turn. My heart raced. I grabbed my Glock 9mm and flung open the door, expecting to find someone or something there, but there was nothing. The yard was empty, bathed in bright sunlight. I circled the property, checking for intruders, but everything was eerily still. Returning to the camper, I tried to rationalize what had just happened, but then I heard whispering near the front of the camper. It was faint but unmistakable. Gathering my courage, I stepped outside again. This time, the world felt unnaturally quiet, no birds chirping, no rustling leaves, just an eerie, oppressive silence. Even the neighborhood dogs, which were always barking, had gone silent. For a moment, felt as though time had frozen. A cold, inexplicable dread washed over me, making the hot summer air feel icy against my skin. I stood motionless, certain that something unseen was watching me. That evening, as I recounted the incident to Linda, her expression turned serious. She hesitated before revealing that the house had a dark history. Decades ago, the property was part of a 19th century homestead, and the original owner mysteriously disappeared. Neighbors had long whispered that the land was cursed. Linda then mentioned that years earlier, her daughter had played with a Ouija board in one of the bedrooms. Since then, Linda and her family had experienced odd occurrences, including unexplained footsteps in the attic and faint laughter at night. 2 nights later, I was sitting alone in the camper when the voices returned, this time at the front door. They were clearer now, as though the speakers were just on the other side. I didn't dare open the door. Instead, I turned on the exterior floodlights, hoping to scare off whoever or whatever was out there. The voices stopped immediately, but when I turned off the lights, they started again, now circling the camper. Fear tightened its grip on me. I wanted to run, but where would I go? The voices seemed to follow me wherever I moved. It wasn't until Emma returned from the main house that the voices finally disappeared. One stormy evening, I lay in bed, listening to the rain hammering against the camper roof. The rhythmic tapping was oddly soothing until it was interrupted by 3 distinct knocks at the door. I bolted upright, my heart pounding, grabbing my flashlight and gun. I approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. There was no answer. When I opened the door, a gust of icy wind rushed past me, chilling me to the bone. No one was there, but as I turned back inside, I noticed the closet door creaking open. Max, our usually fearless dog, growled lowly, his fur standing on end. I slowly pulled the closet door open, only to find it empty, yet I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. The experiences were becoming unbearable. Desperate for answers, I contacted Father Michael, a local priest known for performing house blessings. When he arrived, he immediately sensed something was wrong. "There's a heavy presence here," he said, clutching his rosary tightly. He began blessing the camper and the property, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers. As Father Michael prayed, the atmosphere shifted, lights flickered, the camper shook slightly, and an unearthly growl echoed from somewhere deep within the property. Max barked wildly, retreating to a corner. Despite the chaos, Father Michael stood firm, his prayers growing louder until the disturbances ceased. A week after the blessing, I thought things had finally returned to normal, but on the final night before we planned to leave, I was jolted awake by a loud crash. The camper trembled as though something massive had slammed into it. Max whimpered, hiding under the table. I stepped outside to investigate and found the lawn littered with branches. But as I turned back toward the camper, I saw it, a shadowy figure standing by the guest house. It was tall and formless, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. I froze, unable to move or even breathe. The figure didn't approach but seemed to watch me, its presence radiating pure malice. Summoning all my courage, I shouted, "Leave us alone!" The figure slowly faded into the darkness, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of dread. The next morning, we packed up and left the property for good. Linda sold the house shortly after, unwilling to endure any more strange occurrences. Though we've moved on, the memories of those nights on Elmwood Street still haunt me. Even now, years later, I occasionally wake up in a cold sweat, hearing faint whispers or feeling the cold breath of something unseen. While I may never understand what truly happened, one thing is certain: some places are better left unexplored. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight, exploring these mysterious and spine-chilling stories. If these tales have sparked your curiosity or left you with unforgettable feelings, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had similar paranormal experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to send your story to the email address provided in the description. Who knows? Your story might become part of our journey into the spiritual world in a future episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting tales. See you in the next episode, and remember, always keep a light by your side.